Dimension of Chaos is finally here, and with it comes another new theme of pendulum monsters. This time around we have the Majespecters. They are a theme of level 4 and lower wind spellcaster type monsters, well, almost entirely level 4 or lower, and they are pretty adorable. So they're kind of the reverse of Ignites from Clash of Rebellions. While Ignites had no monster effects, but they did have pendulum effects, Majespecters are the reverse. They have no pendulum effects, but they have very strong monster effects. Each Majespecter monster cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects, so even though their attack points are frequently lower than most monsters, your opponent won't be able to use many of their spell or trap cards against them. And that's important because you need a lot of Majespecters on the field to use with their own signature spells and traps. So here's how they work from the top. Majespecter Raccoon Bunbuku. Whenever it's normal or special summoned, you get to add another Majespecter monster from your deck to your hand. It's the classic Satellarknight Deneb sort of effect, and it's really useful, especially in a pendulum theme, because if you have one end of your pendulum scale and Bunbuku, then you automatically have both ends of the pendulum scale. And as you can see, these are scale 5 and scale 2. So Bunbuku searches for a monster when it is normal or special summoned. And I play 3 of these. Majespecter Cat, Nikomata, searches for any Majespecter card when she's normal or special summoned, but does so in the end phase. So you normal or special summon her, her effect activates, and then during your end phase, you can go search for whatever card you need. And I also play 3 of those. Now, Majespecter Crow Yada, no relation to that other Yada that's been forbidden forever, searches for Majespecter spell cards when normal or special summoned. Also going to play 3 of that. And Majespecter Fox QB does the same thing, but for Majespecter traps. And I play 3 of those as well. Now the Majespecter spell and traps all have a common cost of tributing 1 wind spellcaster type monster. I go pretty light on spells, even though they're really good. Majespecter Storm lets you target a monster your opponent controls, shuffle it into the deck. And Cyclone is a quick play that can destroy a monster that your opponent controls. These are strong, but they're a little more situational than the trap cards, which are pretty much useful all the time, and you want to see as many of them as you can. Majespecter Tornado lets you tribute a wind spellcaster type monster to target a monster on the field, or target a monster your opponent controls, and banish it. It's one of the strongest removal effects you can possibly have, and the Tornado has no activation requirements in terms of timing, so you can use it whenever you want. And they also have the extremely powerful Majespecter Tempest, which you activate again by tributing a wind spellcaster when your opponent would special summon a monster, or a monster effect is activated. And that's when a monster, parentheses S, would be special summoned, meaning you can use it on multiple summons at the same time, like through a pendulum summon. So special summons or monster effects negates them all, and that's why I play 3 each of these, whereas the spells are more situationally useful, but you still want them around. The last Majespecter monster in Dimension of Chaos is not level 4 or lower. It is a level 6 monster, Majespecter Unicorn Kirin. It shares the same can't be targeted or destroyed by opposing card effects that the rest of the Majespecters have, but its ability is what you're going to use mainly to get a lot of damage through. During either player's turn, you can target 1 pendulum monster in your monster zones and 1 of your opponent's monsters, and return both of them to your hand. Returning your own Majespecters to the hand is really good because you get their ability every time they're normal or special summoned, whereas your opponent's monsters probably don't do that. It's especially good against anything that comes out of the extra deck, as the materials used to make it will be lost as that monster is bounced away, and it's especially good against things like Dante, that would get further effects if they went to the graveyard. So, problem. Majespecter Unicorn Kirin is level 6, whereas the top-end pendulum scales for this deck are level 5. Solution. Hybridize this with the pendulum theme from Clash of Rebellions, the Ignites. They go up to level 7, if you'll recall, or pendulum scale 7, which means that you can pendulum summon your Kirins. You can only use 1 Kirin effect per turn, but it is a quick effect, so if you pendulum summoned multiples, you could use 1 during your turn, and then use another one during your opponent's turn. And the Kirin can target itself, so you could, in theory, if you had two of them, just keep using the same two over and over and over again, while the rest of your monsters get to work. In addition to 3 Templars, I also have 1 Ignite Paladin, which is the low scale, and I include this mainly because I'm also using the 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army you can have. Along with it, I have the generic Archfiend Eccentric. Remember, Archfiend Eccentric acts as either a Mystical Space Typhoon or an exiled force, depending on whether or not you play it, or whether you play it as a monster or a spell or trap in your Pendulum Zone. You generally want to play this as a spell, as it is your main means of spell and trap removal, and also it has a pendulum scale of 7 as well. And rounding out the monsters, I'm using Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer, also from Clash of Rebellions. I am not using its pendulum effect here, I am using the fact that it is a tuner, and that it is a tuner that can summon Ignistar Prominence the Blasting Draco Slayer, which is incredibly powerful in and of itself. More on that later. So if you take a look at the total number of pendulum monsters I've got here, you've got what? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 22, 25. That's over 60% of the deck is pendulum monsters. And that can, at times, lead to a little bit of a unplayable hand. For example, if you got all 2 pendulum scales. So I've included a couple ways to help remedy that. Other than, of course, Bambuku being able to search things out. Also included a couple copies of the new quick play spell Ignite Reload. This is from Dimension of Chaos, and it lets you shuffle any number of pendulum monsters in your hand back into the deck, and then you draw a number of cards equal to the number of cards you shuffled back, plus 1. Unlike cards like Magical Mallet or Reload that don't replace themselves along with the cards you shuffle back into the deck, Ignite Reload does. So each time you play one of these cards, you get 1 card deeper into your deck while also fixing your hand. You can't draw any extra cards with card effects other than this after you play one for the turn, and you don't really want to get too many of them in your hand at once, so I played with 2. I also played with 2 Wavering Eyes, which have been kind of a mainstay of Pendulum decks since it first came out in the Cross Souls Advanced Edition, even though it's technically a card from Clash of Rebellions. This gets you any pendulum monster you want, as long as you have 2 already, while loading up your extra deck for further pendulum summons. I personally like to use it to go search for Archfiend Eccentric if I don't have it, and if I do, or I need a synchro summon, I'll go for Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer. So otherwise these 2 are unsearchable in the deck. And rounding out my 40-card main deck, I have a pair of Storming Mirror Forces as well. This is one of the few traps that does work on opposing Majespecter decks, and other decks like Cosmo, where the monsters can't be targeted, because it doesn't target them, and it doesn't destroy them. Though, if you use them against a deck like this, you do have to beware of the fact that the cards can just come right back via Pendulum Summon next turn. On the extra deck side, I know I mentioned it before, but I run a full 3 copies of Ignistar Prominence, Blasting Draco Slayer. Every time you summon this card, it's just really great. It can summon another Luster Pendulum straight from your deck, plus it can destroy that same Luster Pendulum or any other pendulum monster you have to shuffle back a card on your opponent's side of the field back into the deck, and it does so without targeting the enemy card as well. It's extremely powerful, effect-wise, on top of having 2850 attack as well, and I even feel a little awkward not having access to it. Speaking of Draco Slayers, I've also included a pair of the new Majespecter Paladin, the Ascending Draco Slayer. This is from Dimension of Chaos. It's also one of the 5 ultimate rares, and as you might know, this is the last set that will have the last 100 card set that'll have ultimate rares in it for the foreseeable future. So if that's something that interests you, make sure to get it while you have a chance. During the end phase of the turn that you exceed some of this card, you can add any pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. That's a very powerful effect, even if it is delayed to the end phase. It's a great way to set up for the future. And what you can do, even during your main phase, is detach material from it to summon a Draco Slayer back from your extra deck without having to use your Pendulum Summon for the turn. And you can't use it for an Xyz summon, but you probably don't want to, because you'll want to have Magister Pendulum be joined by Ignister Prominence, or Magister Paladin joined by Ignister Prominence. In addition to that, don't forget that you're playing with wind monsters here that are mainly level 3 and level 4, which means you get to have both Totem Bird and Lightning Chidori. In general, the last deck to be able to do this was Ritual Beasts, actually, and a lot of people didn't do it, even though they had the chance, because the fusions and defusing the monsters to go with your trap cards was far more important than having a strong extra deck. However, here, having access to both of these cards is incredibly useful, particularly Lightning Chidori. In addition, I use a lot of rank 3 and 4 monsters that you'd see elsewhere, like Zen Mines, Alucard, I've got Castel, Abyss Dweller. Cane Gorgon's useful for redirecting targeting cards away from the cards in your Pendulum Zone. And I've got Ptolemaeus, Consular Diamond, and Consular Pleiades. That wraps it up for what I'm playing with. Keep in mind that this is just a starting point. You can really do whatever you want. For example, if you are a fan of Synchro monsters and you want to add more of the Synchro spin to your deck, you could play the Speedroids from High Speed Riders. These are also wind monsters, and even though using the effects of Teketenborg, for example, would make it so you can only summon wind monsters for the rest of the turn, that's fine. All your Majespecters are wind monsters, so you're okay with that. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is another card you could use, and if you're feeling you need to get in more damage while still eliminating your opponent's cards, Blazing Mirror Force, also from Docs, from Dimension of Chaos, is an option. I don't have the cards on me right now, but one of the more interesting variants of the deck that I came up with actually uses spellbooks. If you remember the spellbooks from a few years back, they generally work with all spellcaster type monsters. So you could, for example, power up your monsters with Spellbook of Power, double it with Spellbook of the Master, and get some extra searches while also doing a lot of damage. That about wraps it up. If you are interested in Majespecters, be sure to check them out in Dimension of Chaos. If you're interested in this regional map, you can get it this season at a regional tournament near you. You can find more about Dimension of Chaos on our official website, yu-gi-oh-card.com. We've got plenty of stuff up on the strategy site. You can find it under the Gameplay tab. You can also check out other videos here on official Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG on YouTube. And you can follow us on Facebook at official Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG and on Twitter at Yu-Gi-Oh! _TCG. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! all one word, no hyphens, _TCG. And I'll see you all soon.